All right. Well, hello and welcome everybody to another episode of our podcast. I'm here with Colleen.
Oh, hi.
And we're here again with Dr. Jennifer Lisa Vest. Hello, Dr. Jennifer Lisa.
Hi, Robin and Colleen. It's good to be here again.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. I'm so excited about our topic, Akashic Records.
Yes. So we have had Jennifer Lisa on the podcast before. And so if you haven't listened to that episode, I definitely recommend you listen to that maybe after this one. But, they talk about the being an ethical psychic, among lots of other things, which Colleen and I talk about that subject quite often, just being and staying within your scope of practice, and just a wealth of knowledge on, I was saying this before the recording, just a wealth of knowledge on all of the subjects that we talk about with Jennifer Lisa. So we're just so excited to have you again, because as Colleen said, we will be talking about Akashic Records today. And I don't think we've really had a guest on that has, delved into that subject. So just super excited.
Yeah, it's great to be here again.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get into it. So for Dr. Vest, has worked as a medical intuitive with hundreds of clients over the last 12 years, helping people solve their medical mysteries and guiding people to understand and align with their life purpose. Born with the gifts of clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, and mediumship, they were able to hone these gifts through long study and practice at the hands of many teachers in both traditional and formal educational settings, and combines their practice combines all they have learned from my many teachers and trainings, which include herbal and spiritual healing, traditions of African American, Native American, Jamaican, Trinidadian, and spiritual traditions. Dr. Vest is a trained medium, firekeeper, certified QHHT past life regression practitioner, and the Usui Reiki Master. They also have a Ph.D. in Indigenous Philosophy from UC Berkeley and a BA in Physics from Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts. I'm also a philosophy professor with tenure for 10 years and has so many unique qualifications and approaches to healing as an intuitive and logical scientific. Sorry. So there's just so many things that Dr. Vest has on their resume. And like I said before, just a wealth of knowledge. Their book is The Ethical Psychic and was recently released. Now, it's been a little while, right?
Well, it's been about a year now.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I have a new book that's coming out soon as well, but it's not out yet.
Okay. Yeah. So definitely go and get that book. It's just phenomenal. And Dr. Vest has been teaching psychic and healing arts, medical intuition, Akashic records, mediumship, and women of color medicine traditions for many years. They offer trainings and ceremonies, speaking events, books. I mean, just definitely go to their website, Dr. Vest, medicalintuitive.com. Also drjenniferlisavest.com. And then your book, you can get it at like local bookstores, right? Jennifer Lisa.
You can get it everywhere.
And then you can also get it on, if you can't find it at a local bookstore or you don't have one close to you, definitely go to Amazon to get it. We were recently told by somebody that the products or things that we recommend, they definitely go and get them. So like this is one of the ones for sure that you need to get.
Yeah, people don't want to go to Amazon, but you don't have or you can always go into your local bookshop and order it because it's distributed by now I'm forgetting the distributor. It's distributed by a really big distributor.
Penguin Random House.
Yeah, Penguin Random House. So any bookstore can order it and they have free returns. So bookstores have told me it's very easy to get. But if you don't want to do that and you don't want to buy from Amazon, you can also go to bookshop.com, which is a way to get books through independent bookstores, but to get them delivered.
Okay.
Oh,
Awesome.
that's good to
That's
know.
good to know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so today we're going to be talking about the Akashic Records, as we said, because Jennifer Lisa has recently released an Akashic Records meditation on HemiSync, and is also offering a class on the records on her website. So I'm super excited to hear more about this. So why don't we?
And about your book too, whatever,
Yeah.
if you're ready. It's
Oh,
about your
sure.
book.
Yeah. I can talk about all of that.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, let's go ahead and get started, Jennifer Lisa, with your story about and with the Akashic Records, and kind of why why we're focusing on that on the podcast today. And let's just get started. I want to kind of hear about all of it.
Okay, excuse my cough drop and my tea. I have a bit of a cough, so I'm trying to keep it at bay while I speak. Just being around YouTube makes me want to talk about Reiki.
We'll go for that too.
There's just something about, the energy of people who are really fully attuned in Reiki that's so wonderful. And I really enjoy being on this podcast because of your energy. And it's just reminding me of my teacher. My Reiki teacher was Marie Gates, and she's a medium, a spiritual healer, and a Reiki master in the Casadega Spiritualist community in Florida. And that's where I was attuned and trained. And I was really fortunate because she was a Reiki master, but she was also a medium. And so, she was able to teach us, traditionally, pass it on traditionally. But then at the end, when we were at the master level, when you were at the kind of, the highest level of our training, then she started to say, well, you can add mediumship to this. And so I just feel very fortunate that I had a teacher who had that background, because as a medium, for a lot of us, we have different modalities, we have different gifts, and it's nice when you get to the point in your life where you can start to combine your gifts. And of course, we don't want our students to do that at the beginning because we want them to learn the tradition. And you don't want people coming into like a Reiki 1 class and trying to do other modalities, right? But I felt really fortunate that once we mastered, the Reiki teaching, she was then able to show us how to work with Reiki and mediumship at the same time. So I just wanted to express my gratitude to her while I'm here. And now let's see. So that's a part of my story. And maybe I'll go backwards because I'm always telling my origin story, and I'm bored with it. So I'm going to tell it differently today. Instead of starting at the beginning, I'll go backwards. So currently, I write books and teach courses on a wide variety of subjects like Akashic Records and medical intuition, psychic development. And it's really interesting how spirit sets up your life so that you end up doing what you came to do, right? This wasn't my plan. And I spent a great deal of my life resisting this path. And I spent a great deal of my life getting trained to do something else, So I was an intellectual and an academic, and I went and got a lot of degrees. I got my bachelor's, I got my master's, and I got my Ph.D., and then I did a postdoc. And then I was a professor of philosophy for many years. And all during that time, I was also a psychic and a medium, but I was trying to keep it quiet. And I was also getting trainings, traditional trainings in parallel with all of my academic training. But these were kind of like two different lives I was leading. And it was interesting because, I just kept being kind of put onto this path. And so like this Reiki class, the Reiki training I received is an example of that. I had no intention of learning Reiki. It was not something I was seeking when I ended up in this class, but the teacher approached me and she said, I'm forming a class, invitation only. I'm inviting you to this class. And she was someone who I knew as a teacher in the Catholic Spiritualist camp where I lived for 5 years. And I took many classes with many mediums and healers there. And I had taken probably some other class with her. I don't remember. And she had picked out 5 people that she decided she wanted to train. And if she had not done that, I doubt I would have pursued a Reiki course because I wasn't really seeking that, but it was seeking me. And that was the story of a lot of my training, is that teachers kept showing up, especially when I was younger, and saying, oh, come here. And they started training me. And I was often in situations where that wasn't my intention. So like I was in, when I was a small child, my great grandmother started teaching me when I was very young. She said that I was the one in my generation who had the gift that she passed on. And then also my mother, when I was very young, said, oh, I was the one among her children who had the gift. And so she used to bring me into the front room and we used to have these little, she'd invite me to these little ceremonies. I didn't know what was going on. And when I was in my 20s, I was working on my master's degree and ended up going to some ceremonies that I thought I was going to in the context of writing my thesis. But then when I went, I ended up being, taken aside by teachers and said, you're one of us, we're going to train you. And that happened again in my 30s. When I went to Jamaica, again, ostensibly for an academic project, working for somebody as their assistant. But then as soon as I got there, all of these healers started grabbing me and pulling me aside and inviting me to ceremonies. And that happened again when I went to a sweat lodge for some sweats, and the firekeeper said, hey, you're meant to be a firekeeper. I'm going to train you. And so I kept having this experience. And I can see now how everything that happened in my life was all very intentional and very much spirit led, that it got me to the point now where, because of my background, because of the different trainings I've received in different traditions, and because of my academic background, I'm now able to bring all of that together into what I teach and what I write. And it kind of makes sense now, right? That it happened the way it did. But it didn't always make sense when it was happening. And so, yeah, I, at a certain point in my life, excuse me, I got very sick and went to a medical intuitive. And when I went to the medical intuitive, she told me that if I didn't fully embrace my gifts and get very serious about intentional training, that I was going to stay sick. And it was at that point that I, for the first time, started to seek out teachers and trainings. Because prior to that, like I said, they were just seeking me. And at that point, I actually started to take classes, and I moved to the spiritualist community where I could just take lots of classes with different healers and mediums. And then, I studied Reiki, and I ended up then, when I moved to California, I decided to study QHHT because I had been a client of that modality for many years. I had done many past life regressions with different practitioners, and I found the practice just so powerful. And I also read all of Dolores Cannon's books and found that they really fit with what I was experiencing and what I was being taught by my guides. And then I just, I continue to this day to always seek out new teachings, new trainings, and to try to learn from other healers. And so one of the things that's great about the work I've been doing lately, where I've been teaching online and teaching live classes for the Shift Network, it's allowed me the opportunity to bring different healers into my class and to have conversations in my class with different Indigenous healers. And that's been really powerful. And also having my book published has allowed me to get all of these invitations for podcasts. And that's put me in touch with people like you. And that's also been very powerful, just to be able to have conversations with other healers. I always learn something in these conversations. And so I feel very blessed by that. So that's kind of my training in a nutshell, I guess. Without all the details, without.
I know, right? There's always so much more expanded versions of it all.
Yeah.
What I find so interesting about the ideas of your training with all of it is then when you kind of talk about the Akashic records, there's a level of spiritual intellectualism with them as well, because I mean, visually, yeah, it's like you can just kind of, well, how I imagine it is what I should say is that you have this infinite library that you can just pull the books out of the infinite library. And so I'm just curious as to that connection from your perspective of how that kind of part of you that loves the study of things, the knowledge, the wisdom of it, and how that works for you within the Akashic records.
Yeah, it really makes a lot of sense that I ended up working in the Akashic Records, because I just love libraries. And my favorite place in the world is the Library of Congress. And I just, I could spend so much time in libraries, and I do. I used to spend a lot more time when I was an academic. But, I came to the Akashic Records without realizing it. So from the time I was quite young, I used to, I traveled to the other world. So when I was very young, I did leave out my spirit teachers, which is kind of important. So I got all these trainings by humans, but I also had spirit teachers since I was born. And these beings would come and get me at night when I was very small and take me to spirit school. And then they would also take me to other places in the other world. And they would also take me to the future and the past and different places. And I've spent a lot of time in the other world my entire life. And one of the places I used to go in the other world was a giant library. And I just assumed I went there because I like libraries and because I was being taught. I was often being taken to classrooms and libraries. And then over time, as I got older, I started teaching on the other side. I started doing healing work on the other side. There's a lot that goes on over there. And so I just thought, well, the library is just one other thing that's over there, right? And then one day I found out that the place I was going to was called the Akashic Records. And I found out by, talking to somebody who read the Akashic Records, and they gave me a meditation, and they said, oh, do this meditation. And it was just a typed up meditation. It wasn't like a meditation CD. So I was kind of like trying to read it with one eye open and meditate, at the same time. And I just read a couple sentences of it. And then I was in my library. And that's how I found out that the Akashic Records is the name for this place I had been going. And, I didn't really set out to work with the Akashic Records. It's just one of those things that I was led to. And so I was working as a medical intuitive and seeing clients for medical mysteries. And most of the time people come to me, they want to know the physical causes of their ailment. And then I would also sometimes provide the emotional causes. And then every so often there would be somebody who had spiritual causes for their ailments. And I ended up going to the Akashic records to get information about the spiritual causes of their illness. And that was how I started to work with the Akashic records pretty regularly, was in that context of helping clients. And so, I think of it, I describe it as an energetic library, or like another plane of existence. You can think of it as one of the places in the other world where we go when we leave our bodies, whether we're leaving our bodies at night while we dream, leaving our bodies through conscious out-of-body experiences, or leaving our bodies after death. When we leave the physical body and travel in our other energy bodies, we can travel to these other realms. And I perceive the Akashic records as being kind of on the border between the mental and causal planes. But I think other people have different conceptions. So that you have to go beyond the astral plane to get to the Akashic records. And that's really important, because if you don't, as many people know, if you get stuck in the astral plane, you're going to get stuck in the realm of, fantasy and nightmare. And there's a lot of astral beings. And so that's not a really useful plane to go to if you want information. But if you go to these higher planes, there's all types of, cosmic wisdom you can access. And what I like about the Akashic records is, I guess what I like about libraries, it's a repository where you can just get all of this information in one place. And how exciting is that, now we have Google. It used to be you go to the library to get all your questions answered, and now people go to Google and, with mixed results and seek out their answers. Or we have lots of online databases now. And so you can think of the Akashic records as, a database, an energetic database where you can download information. And I love it because you can get your questions answered. And, as a philosophy professor, one of the things I focused on in my classes was fundamental questions. I was a philosophy professor, but I really used that position to be more like a life purpose coach, And so I was trying to help my students to get clarity on what their purpose was, why they're here, who they are, what does it mean to be a good person, what is justice? These are the fundamental questions that I always had my students address in my philosophy classes. And I do feel like the Akashic records is similar in that you can ask all these fundamental questions. And so you can go to the records and ask things like, why am I here? Why did I incarnate? Who am I really? What are my gifts? What did I come to do? What lessons did I come to learn? What lessons did I come to teach? Do I have soul contracts with certain people? Do I have karmic relationships? Is there a spiritually significant reason why I'm having this serious illness, or why this pattern keeps repeating in my life? You can ask these really big questions in the Akashic records, and you can get information that's more pure, that's not so tainted by kind of earthly concerns and prejudices and narrowness of vision. And this is so helpful and expansive for people. I really do think that getting clarity on your life purpose, for example, just is so important for everybody. When people don't have clarity on their purpose, they can feel very lost, they can be very unhappy, and they can find themselves, casting about either in their career or their relationships, because they're not really doing what they came to do. And so there's not that feeling of fulfillment. And this is one of the great things about the Akashic records, is that you can answer questions like that. You can go and find out, what is my purpose? And so, yeah, it really appeals to me, I think, because I'm an intellectual and because I like libraries and because I like to help people get answers. When I was a professor, I did that. And now, as a Akashic Records reader and medical intuitive, I also was doing kind of the same work, helping people get answers to their questions, helping people to live their life in alignment with what they came to do. And, I spent many years doing that as a practitioner, sitting down one-on-one with people and doing 1-hour sessions where I would go to their records, describe their records to them, and explain them to them, or go and do a medical scan of them and explain to them why they were sick. And my guides have pivoted me recently away from the personal sessions and into writing books and teaching larger classes online so that I can reach a global audience. And because the pivot for me is away from me getting the answers for people, and it's a pivot to helping people get their own answers. And so I teach people how to be their own medical intuitive or how to be a medical intuitive for others. And I teach people how to read their own Akashic records. I teach people how to develop psychically and how to expand their consciousness. And then I'm writing books, for the same purpose. I don't know if
So I have a couple of questions. Well, first I want to comment on your story, really your spiritual connection through your life. And because so commonly I talk about a common experience of many of us who would have been identified as children with these gifts, but because culturally they were not, something our parents actually taught us not to show.
Mm-hmm.
And so, learning them that inner tapping to find it, and I think for a lot of us, it's the generation seemed to be looking for it younger now, but in my generation, it was more when we were 40-ish and going into our 50s there was that meaning of life, trying to find it, and that pathway to our own personal truth and our own inner truth. And then another comment is when you talk about finding the answers, I just got back from Egypt, and when I was in the temple with Sekhmet, and I got to go right up to her, and I was kind of waiting to know what to ask or what to do, and what I heard her say was, listen for the questions that you have that you don't know how to ask. And so I've really been engaging with that. And, it's something I think I started with a long time ago in my spiritual training, but I have found that often, like even the questions that you just stated that you asked in your philosophy classes, I would bet there are a lot of people who wouldn't even know to ask the question, to know what the answer, to even access, to go to the answer. And then the other question I have about it is, do the Akashic records, mostly in my experience with them, I'm working with them with people, but does what all is in the Akashic records? Are there animals and the earth and the other realms that you speak of? So anyway, those are just a few of as I've been listening, some of my.
Yeah. So we addressed the first question about what if you don't know what your question is? Well, there's this great question that people can always ask, whether they're in the records or they're talking to an ancestor or a guide. And that question is, what do I need to know right now? And you can always ask that question and get guidance? I often ask that question. I have guides that I talk to on a regular basis. I also go to the Akashic Records for my own questions. And I will, sometimes that's all I'll ask. What do I need to know right now? Because, yeah, we sometimes don't know what we need to know.
Right?
That's right. And sometimes we do ask questions that aren't really the most important questions. And, it's funny how that can get handled when we're dealing with high level beings, where we might come and say, oh, I want to know when I'm going to meet my soulmate, or, when am I going to be a millionaire, right? We have these silly questions, or these questions that we think are important. And then a lot of times when we're dealing with higher level beings, they'll say, well, this is what you should be asking for. I'm going to talk about this instead. And they'll give you different information. As to what's in the records, different people experience the Akashic Records differently. And the way I teach the Akashic Records is I teach people to visualize the records the way I experience them. And what I tell people is, I'm going to teach you how to access the records the way I do, because all anyone can teach you is what they know. They can't teach you something else. I'm going to only be able to teach what I know and what I've been taught, right? So that's what I teach. I teach what I know. But then I tell people, when you're done learning what I have to teach you, your records will change and you will develop other rooms in your records depending upon your path and your guidance. And so the way I teach it is I describe the Akashic Records as this library that has many rooms. And so maybe I should back up a little bit and talk about how my library came to be. When I first started out, it was just this big, beautiful library with like armchairs and those ladders going up to the upper shelves. And it was one of those big kind of old-fashioned home libraries where you could be very comfortable and do your research. But once I got very intentional about going to the records, my records morphed and expanded. And so when I started to intentionally go to the records, my records turned into this kind of high-tech media room. Like in libraries, I always have a media room. And I would go into this media room where there was somebody at the door, right? There's always, a guard for different planes of existence who lets you in. And so it was like, a media librarian, I guess, would let me in. And then I would give my name and they would give me a little like fob. And then I would be directed over to this kind of like computer, some kind of machine. And I would stick the fob in the machine. And then it would project a movie on the wall and it would show me like a past life. And so that was my first or my second version of the Akashic Records after the Comfy Library. So the Comfy Library was more of a place where I would just go and kind of download. But then I started going to this place where I would actually was looking at past lives. Then over the years, when I started to work for other people, when I was actually, working with clients and trying to get information about their illnesses, I was led to a more expansive library where I go in, there's a librarian, and then the librarian leads me to whatever the appropriate room is to go to for the type of information I'm seeking that day. And I would give the name of the client to the librarian. And now, reading your own Akashic Records and reading someone else's are two very different things. And people who read their own records don't necessarily have the ability or permission to read other people's records. And so it does make sense that when I go to the records for myself, I don't necessarily go to the same places that I go to when I'm reading for someone else. But when I'm reading for someone else, I was directed into this library that has many rooms. And so, one of the rooms in my library is the theater room. And so the theater room is where a lot of stuff happens. That's where you go to see movies of past lives. And so a lot of people's questions are related to past lives, or they're related to our pre-life agreements. And so in the theater room, you can go and view a past life that relates to your question. So if somebody comes and says, oh, why was I born with this disability? disability X. And then we might go to the theater room and we might be shown a past life. And then after that past life ends, we'll go to the post-life conference, which is like a meeting on a cloud with your incarnation guides, where they'll discuss the purpose of that life. And then we might go then to a pre-life conference, which is also on a cloud with your guides, where they talk about, okay, this is where you're going to incarnate next. And then this is the current life. And then we get to listen in to, what were the agreements? What were the decisions made about what this life is going to be about? What kind of body this person's going to choose? What family, what geography, what language, what race, what gender, what sexuality, what class background, what body type, what ailments. Like all of these things are a part of the decision making before we incarnate. And they're all purposeful. And so a lot of times people have a question about why this. And so when people had a question about, why do I have this disability? And this was the most often the spiritual causes of illness that I saw were usually related to congenital things people were born with. Mm-hmm. And so when a soul decides I'm going to be born with this condition because it's going to help me fulfill my purpose, then they'll come into this lifetime with it at birth. And then other people will sign up for key pivots in their life. And it might be an accident where they get injured or an illness that changes their life in some significant way. And this will also be discussed in the pre-life conference. And so this is one room in my records where you can get information about past lives, about pre-life agreements. And one of the things you can find out in the pre-life conference is, what's your purpose? You can find out if you have any karmic connections with other souls. You can find out if you have soul contracts with other souls. So you'd be sitting on the cloud and there's another soul there and they're like, oh, we're going to incarnate together this time for this purpose. And sometimes they're shown past lives to understand what was the past life that I had with this person before and why are we together again in this lifetime, right? And so the idea that people have, soulmates. A soulmate is somebody who you're in a soul family with, and then you agree to incarnate together. And people have this kind of misguided idea that a soulmate is a romantic partner, but a soulmate can be a boss, it can be a family member, it can be a romantic partner, it can be your child, it can even be a stranger on the street that you have one very significant encounter with, that you agreed to have. It can be somebody who's a villain in your life, who victimized you in some way. And these can all be members of your soul family who had a contract with you or a karmic tie. And so these are the kind of things we can find out in the theater room. There's a lot of information there. That's kind of the most popular room. But then if we go down the hallway, there's lots of other rooms in the records. And so there's also a room called the conference room. And in the conference room, you can meet with just about anybody. You can meet with your ancestors. You can meet with your dead pets. You can meet with angels. You can meet with your spirit guides or your spirit teachers. You can meet with your ET relatives if you're a starseed. You can talk to plants and animals and rocks. You can speak to the organs in your body. You can speak to anybody in the conference room. And so that's another room in the Akashic Records. And then there's another room called Mother's Room or the Healing Room. And this is where you can go to get healing in the Akashic Records. And so in this room, you don't ask questions, you don't get information, you just go in. And there's a very high level light being called the Mother who uses colored light and colored water and immerses you in these different colors to heal you. And you don't have to go in there with a diagnosis, a symptom, a question, anything. In fact, usually when you're in the records and you go into the Mother's Room, it's not because you had that intention, but people will just be in the record, walking down the hall, and then they get to the Mother's Room and they just get sucked in because they need healing. And this happens to me all the time when I go into the records. I think, oh, I'm going to answer all these questions. And then it's like, nope, I'm getting a healing.
The Mother Room knows.
Yes. And of course, you can get questions answered also, because the interesting thing about the Mother's Room is you can bilocate. So you can go in, a part of you can go into the mother's room and get healing, and another part of you can go into another room in the records and get answers. And so there's another room called the bank vault. And the bank vault, which looks like, a regular bank vault with one of those big, heavy doors that you turn. And it's filled with all these security deposit boxes, little boxes from floor to ceiling. And one of them has your name on it. And this is a room where you can go and find out about your gifts. And so the banker brings down one of your box to you, and you go through it and you discover what your gifts are. There's another room called the map room. And this is a room where very few people go to, but it's a room where you can get very high level information about your soul versus information about your life. So this life, of course, is just one incarnation of many. And our soul incarnates over many lifetimes and pursues many different purposes. But our soul also has a purpose, and our soul has patterns. And then within those patterns, we have lifetimes. And so some people, and this is usually people who are light workers or who came here with a pretty serious agenda that has, more of a global impact, say, than just a local impact. Sometimes those people need to go to the map room, because in the map room, you get access to a map of your whole soul and of all the incarnations that you've had, and of the different purposes or patterns. So people will have a soul pattern where, let's say their pattern is to teach. And so they'll have multiple lifetimes where they were a teacher, but in different ways. And they might be a teacher who's a formal teacher. They might be a teacher who's a mother teaching their child. They might be a teacher who's a boss teaching their employees. And so they'll have lots of different lifetimes where the common kind of denominator is some type of teaching. But then in each lifetime in that pattern, the purposes are different. Like one purpose might be, I'm going to come here to raise, as a mother to this one soul, to help raise this one soul, to teach it things that it needs to fulfill its purpose, right? And in another lifetime, my purpose is to be a conscious business owner who introduces a new way of treating employees in the culture that I'm in. And so you will have these different individual life purposes, but there's a pattern that they all fall under, and that pattern has to do with the soul purpose during that particular set of lifetimes. And I'm trying to explain it very quickly. It's a little more complex than this, but basically this is a room where some people go to get kind of bigger picture information that helps them to contextualize their current life purpose in a larger purpose. And so, some people coming to the Akashic Records, they already know their purpose. They might even already know many of their past lives. They might already know their soul contracts. And for those people, they may have questions that would be more appropriate to ask in the map room. And then there are other rooms. And over the years, new rooms kept showing up. And new rooms, I think, will continue to show up for me. And also, I have different rooms depending on who I'm teaching. So I had a set of apprentices for a while where my work with them was pretty in depth with regard to helping them get clarity on their purpose and get on their path and kind of understand all of their soul contracts, karmic ties, patterns. And as a result, when I worked with them, I had extra rooms that opened up specifically for them. Like I had a whole room called the Healing Basement, which was just devoted to healing gifts and understanding healing gifts. And when I worked with star seeds, that's when I had an observatory show up in my Akashic Records, where I could help star seeds identify the planetary systems or star systems they're from, and even visit with their star seed family, star family. And so I teach in my class, I teach people how to go to this records that has all these rooms where you can ask all these different types of questions and get different types of answers and get healing right? But then I tell people, after you finish learning this and you practice this, you will have other rooms show up in your library. Um, and like this library I just described, it doesn't have any books, right? The first room that you go into in the library is this giant, central hall full of books. And so like the Akashic Records meditation that I did with HemiSync, it's just visiting that hall of books and finding the book that's about your life. And so that's another way to go into the records if you're just wanting to, ask questions and you don't want to travel to all these rooms. You can go into that kind of first kind of reference room of the library. So there's a lot of different kinds of information available in the records. I really don't think there's any limit to what answers you can get in the records, because what the Akashic Records is it's a repository of information about every soul that's ever incarnated and everything about that soul. And so any question you would have about your life, you could, or about your soul, you could get answered there.
So I have a couple of questions. The first one, so you have this guided meditation in your class. Is that how you're teaching how to access? Are you guiding, or is it like a journey style? And then my second kind of question is, it's not really a question, just Metatron. So is that we work with Metatron, or so those would be my two things that I'd like to.
Yeah, so I do work with Metatron, but when I teach the Akashic Records, I no longer teach people to work with Metatron. I used to, when I first started leading people in Akashic Records meditations, I would have them work with Metatron in the records. And Metatron, for those who don't know, is an archangel who he's the scribe, and he works with the records. There's also an Egyptian figure named Thoth who also works with the records. And they're actually, I think of them as different names for the same being. And there are lots of kind of representations of a being like Metatron in different traditions, which are seen as kind of the keeper of the records. And so I stopped using the term Metatron, and that's a much longer story, but I worked with Metatron for many, many years, and Metatron is the guide who has helped me so much in formulating my school that I'm founding. I'm founding a school of psychic and science, and I've been working on it for several years. And I was working with Metatron initially for quite some time, but I have 13 guides, 12 guides plus Metatron, I guess. And at a certain point, all of the guides came through and gave me detailed guidance on the school. And then I was kind of reprimanded that I was spending too much time listening to Metatron when I had all of these other guides. And I think I became enamored with Metatron because of my work with the records, and just he showed up in a particular way in my life about 15, 20 years ago, and just kept showing up and was just such a powerful guide, like gave me such clear information. And that makes sense. He's a communicator. He works with the records, he works with knowledge. And so he's very good. He's associated with teaching. And so he's a good archangel to work with when you're an educator or when you're working with the records. But over time, I got away from referencing Metatron in the records. And that's in part because, I began to more explicitly teach from some of my indigenous trainings. And for a long time, when I started out, I was in Los Angeles. It's very, in Los Angeles, things are just very, very professional, very high level, very competitive. And what's great about starting a business in LA is that the standards are so high for everything that you have to learn how to do things in a certain way. And I'm really grateful for that experience. But when I started teaching outside of LA, I started going to the Bay Area, the Oakland, San Francisco, Berkeley area, and I started being around other people. It was around that time that I was called to start, formulating my Women of Color Medicine series, and to start really explicitly teaching from all of my backgrounds, the Caribbean, African American, Native American, and spiritualist traditions, and to not kind of only present it in kind of culturally neutral terms, which I had been doing before. I think because of the business climate I was in. And when I started to do that, I decided to not just reference beings that were only known about in certain traditions. So Metatron is a being who's only really known from ancient Judaic texts, and I think one of the Islamic texts mentions of Metatron. And so I began, and at the same time, I had been working with Thought, who came to me in a meditation many years ago with the ibis head, and I had to go look up who is this, and found out it was this Egyptian Kemetic god or high-level being or angel, depending on your terminology. And I began to understand that there were so many faces to these beings in different cultures. And so, like, even the term Akashic Records, I use it because that's what I was led to work with. In other cultures, that same term isn't used, but you have lots of shamanistic traditions where people travel to repositories of information. It's just not called that. And so a big part of my work in the last few years in teaching has been about teaching from a more global perspective. There's been too much of kind of a Western kind of what's the word for that? Just kind of a way in which Westerners have taken control of certain bodies of spiritual knowledge and presented them as something that was created in the West recently. And anyone who's trained in anything else knows that's not true. And so one of my projects has been kind of a reclamation of Indigenous practices and kind of teaching people that, we have to look more broadly, that these ideas come from different cultures. Some of them, were suppressed and outlawed in Indigenous cultures and then reformulated by Westerners and considered legitimate because they were being presented by white males. Whereas if they were presented by Indigenous females, they were considered savage or primitive. And so it is part of my path to get people to rethink some of that and to try to get more Indigenous and non-Western practitioners to get those teachings out into the mainstream, out into the public. And so, all this to say, I don't explicitly work with Metatron the way I used to, or I don't talk about Metatron the way I used to, because I do want the work to be more accessible and to be perceived more as a global, this is another realm. It certainly isn't tied to any one culture. And so, but it's silly how we do that, right? We understand things in terms of where we are and where we're from and what, how we were raised. And it just so happens that my purpose is to help people to connect different traditions and to help people see things in a more global way and to help people understand that these teachings and these beliefs are not the provenance of just one tradition, but they are really the provenance of the cosmos And certain lineages have been able to do a very good job of receiving and transmitting this information. So you can work with the records by going into the records and working with Metatron. When I go into the records, I have different guides in the records, which I come up with names for, which is probably just based on, my background and the fact that I'm a teacher and I like things to be simple. So I have the librarian. So the guide that you meet when you first enter my library is the librarian. Like when you go into a library and there's a reference or circulation desk, right? When you go into my records, there's a circulation desk. Now, this is just a presentation, right? On a cosmic level, what we're really dealing with is that when you go into different levels of consciousness or awareness or different dimensions, planes of existence, we have these guards, right? And everyone's not allowed access everywhere. And so that's why when you go into the records, there always has to be somebody there to let you in, right? And whether you call that Metatron or a librarian or Thoth or a keeper of the record, lords of the record, some people use that term, masters of the records. What that all references is this understanding that everybody has who works at that level. Anyone who works in other realms, we understand that you have to have permission to access certain realms. And so that's why when you go into the records, there's someone there letting you in, and then you have to give your name, or if you're reading someone else, you have to give their name, because there has to be somebody to allow you access to that information. And we can portray that in different ways. There was a period of time when, sometimes when I have students who I've worked with for a while, they'll approach me for, more an in-depth training, like apprenticeship or mentee work. And I had one person who came to me and she said, I really want to learn how to read the records for other people. Can we do some private trainings? And so the first thing I had to do was I had to ask, was she allowed to do this? Did she have permission to do this? And I went into an altered state and I asked, and I then got a whole training program for her where her records looked very different from my records. And I was led to train her to work in a records, which was really Egyptian, looked like an Egyptian temple. And it had water, and it had the three kind of guides in her records were all women. And it was a very different presentation of the records with different keepers of the records and a different way of getting information. But that's what I was guided to teach her. That was what was appropriate for her. And so, some people are going to work with Metatron because that's what's appropriate. Some people are going to work with Thoth, and some people are going to work with other personages from their tradition. And I like working with, everybody. So I have worked with a lot of different beings in the records. But the way that I teach the records is I teach it in a way that anybody can access it. You don't have to understand or know about Metatron or Thoth or ancient Kemetic traditions. You can kind of enter into the library that I teach people to use, and it's kind of a generic library that you can then make your own over time. And I'm just remembering there was a question in there that I didn't answer about, how do people access the records? You said, is it a meditation? And yeah, it's kind of a meditation or a journey where, I guide people into an altered state so that they can access this realm. And When I first started teaching Akashic Records, I actually was teaching the methods of other people in addition to my own. So I used to teach people Linda Howe's Akashic Records prayer, and I used to teach people Ernesto Ortiz's Akashic Records technique, which is a Mayan form where he uses a prayer, but also certain meditation techniques. And then I would just do mine, which was to lead people on a journey. And what my students kept reporting to me over the years was they got the most information when they used my method. And it kind of makes sense, right? You got to teach what you know. I'm teaching other people's methods. I'm probably not teaching them the way they teach them. I'm sure if you went to their class, you would have a good experience. But I'm a secondhand person, like reading their book and saying, well, let's try this method. Whereas when I lead people in my method, I'm teaching more from my own training and background, and people have found that to be more effective. And so now in my course, that's what I teach. I just teach using my guided journeys along with the visualization. So like describing my records in detail is a part of the process because I'm helping people to visualize. If people have been told in advance, this is what it looks like, that aids them in visualizing it when I lead them in the journey. And so that's the technique that I use.
Do you consider them a divine realm, like an upper worlds type or lower world type realm, or would it be for kind of a simplified, idea of that, or are they somewhat of a different realm that you?
Well, I think you're talking kind of in shamanistic terms.
Yeah.
So in a lot of shamanistic traditions, there's this idea of lower worlds and upper worlds. And, I have only really worked with upper worlds. And it's funny because when I used to lead my Women of Color Medicine series, I became self-conscious of the fact that I only worked with upper worlds and I didn't work with lower worlds. So one day I said, I'm going to do a lower world journey for them. We're going to go into the Mother Earth and we're going to go down in there. And people were just like, no, we don't like that. And I think I got some clarity that that's just not my work, right? Mm-hmm. Some people, that's what they do. They go down into lower worlds, into the earth, and they work in that realm. But that's just not what I do. So my work is always in the higher realms. And so like I was saying earlier, if you think of these different planes of existence, like there's the earth, the physical realm, and above it, there's these astral realms. And then above that, there are mental realms. And above that, there are causal realms. And above that, there are, Buddhic or spiritual realms. There's different descriptions of these realms in different traditions. I really like the Theosophist classification, which is what I tend to use. And I think I really like I really like a lot of Theosophy teachings because, well, they combine East and West. They got all their information from India, but then they brought it over to the West and they put it in terms that are easy to understand. If you try to read, ancient Vedic texts, they're very challenging. That's why there's a whole caste dedicated to reading them in India, right? That spend generations learning how to read them. It's, high level philosophers who have to read those texts. And so it's nice when you can take something that's very high level and present it in a form that's easy to read. And that's what the Theosophists did. People like Charles Ledbetter and Annie Besant. Madame Blavatsky, not so much. Blavatsky is very hard to read. But Annie Besant and Charles Ledbetter and Rudolf Steiner to a certain extent, although he's kind of hard to read for non-philosophers, I've been told. But they took these really ancient descriptions of other worlds that were found in ancient Indian texts, and then they put them into terms that are easy for us to understand. And so I like those kind of descriptions, and they for me they match my experience. So my whole life has been about having these experiences in other worlds with my spirit teachers, and then finding books that match my experience, or finding teachers or finding traditions where people can explain my experience to me. And so the way that I conceive of it as is of going to these higher realms. And so the way that I lead people up is that we spiral up through 11 different levels. And then the 11th level is where we get to the Akashic records. And so you can think of it as an upper world. You can also think of it as where we go when we dream at night. So like in the Seminole tradition, I'm a Seminole, there's an understanding that everybody leaves their body at night and goes to the other world. And now other traditions like the Theosophists will tell you the same thing, that we leave our physical body behind and we travel in our other energy bodies. And so if you're traveling in your astral body, you'll go to the astral plane. If you're traveling in your mental body, you'll go to the mental plane. And if you're traveling in your causal body, you'll go to the causal plane. And depending upon people's level of kind of spiritual development, you will have access to different levels. But my purpose is to show and to remind people of who they really are. And so all of my teachings and practices and books are about helping people to remember who they really are and to kind of get ignited. And then once that happens, once people get access in any way, shape, or form to who they really are, to their soul, to their higher self, to their life purpose, to their gifts, they can just take off at that point, right? They don't need me anymore. They don't need anyone. They just can then take off and just expand and develop and pursue their purpose. And so the Akashic records, what I like about it is that when I expose people to this, spiritual technology, once they learn how to do it, they then have access to all of this cosmic wisdom, and they then have the ability to travel to another realm and have experiences with higher level beings consciously, not just in their sleep and dreams. And this is just so powerful for people. It's something that you learn and then you practice. And once you learn it and you practice it, it can become a resource for the rest of your life that you can just always access. And this is true about lots of spiritual technologies, right? It's like once you learn how to meditate, another thing that I teach in all my classes is a higher self meditation, because that's another one of those, techniques, you could call it, or tools that once you have it, for the rest of your life, you have access, to higher level information. So just learning how to connect yourself to your higher self allows you to access information that you can use for your life. And so that's what I like anything like that, that's why I like to teach medical intuition too, because I have this background where, I'm an educator, I'm a philosopher, I have a science background, and then I'm also an intuitive. I really like to marry them. I like to figure out things I can teach or give to people that they can take and just run with.
Yeah.
And that's what I like, I think, about the records. It's not terribly difficult. I mean, it does require a meditative mind. And so most people that I have taught are able to access the records. On the rare occasion when somebody struggles, I find that it's always the case that it's somebody who never meditates, and they just they don't know how to sit still, they don't know how to ground, they don't know how to take time away from their life and just be in a mindful moment. And so, but that anyone can learn that. Anyone can learn to meditate. And some people think they can't. And when I was younger, I thought that was me. I used to say, "Oh, I can't meditate. My mind's too busy." And of course, I spent my life meditating, engaging in different practices that were meditative. But I think at a certain point, I became misinformed by somebody thinking that meditation was the absence of thought. And, being an indigo ADHD type, there was like no way I was ever going to have an empty mind. I have a very busy mind. And so I thought at some point, I'm never going to learn how to meditate properly because I can never get my mind empty. Well, meditation is not about getting your mind empty. But it wasn't until I studied, with different people and different meditative practices that I realized, there's a lot of different ways to meditate. So like when I was training as a firekeeper, they didn't call it meditation. In that context, my teacher told me, if you want to be in ceremony, you have to think good thoughts and you have to monitor your thoughts. And that's more important than anything else in the ceremony. So you might walk in the wrong direction or put the rock down in the wrong place. You might not do things exactly right. But if you have good thoughts and your thoughts are completely focused on the ceremony and nothing else, the ceremony will go well. Well, what is that? That's meditation, right? That's being what we call mindful, right? Where your whole focus is on, for example, the flames, right? I would sit at the fire and my whole focus had to be on the fire. And I had to talk to the fire. That's a part of the training as a firekeeper. As you commune, you are one with the fire, you're connected with the fire, you're communicating with the rocks. That's just another form of meditation, right? Call it a fire meditation, call it a rock meditation. If you're out in nature and you're picking sage, we were taught to pick sage, but we were taught you had to have your mind in a certain way to pick the sage. Well, that's another type of meditation, right? And so anybody can learn to meditate. It doesn't matter how busy your mind is. It doesn't matter how busy your life is. It's just about finding a way to like really tune in to something and be totally present, and to then kind of open yourself up to receive insights. Because as soon as you allow yourself those moments of silence or those moments of focus, non-focused focus, you will start to receive. And so what I tell people if they struggle with Akashic records, meditate daily, even if it's 3 minutes a day, meditate. Or garden, or, engage in some other activity that's meditative. And they will then find that it's easy to go into these altered states. We all go into altered states without trying, right? We zone out when we're driving. That's an altered state. Right before we go to sleep, we go into alpha, and then we go into theta before we go to sleep. And we wake up, we come back into theta and alpha before we go into beta and are fully awake. And so we all go into altered states daily. But the trick is, can you allow yourself to consciously go into an altered state and feel safe doing so, and trust that you're going to be able to go into another realm and meet with these higher level beings and receive guidance that's helpful for your life, and that's really what the Akashic Records is.
I just love the morphic resonance of it all, because we teach a class called Explore the 12 Heavens, or Explore the 12 Levels of Consciousness. And the first level being the physical earthly realm. And then, you kind of continue up into the formless, and just, it's, it sounds, and we use the technology, this, the spiritual technology of Reiki to help to do that work. And so much of what you said about, you teach people the template but it's really all about your own inner truth and your own inner guidance, with, of course, the honoring of, the practices and where they have come from. But at the same time, then once you have learned those things about, also, it is too about your inner guidance and your inner truth. So it's just always, I love having these conversations, because you hear people, like you said, from all over the world, and different things that they're doing and teaching, and, and these sometimes it can all feel so big and yet so small. And then when we can have these conversations and realize how connected we all are. And so anyways, really beautiful. I just love that.
Yeah. Another example of meditation that I learned was when I was trained in the Caribbean traditions like Shango and revivalism. And one of the things that would happen in those ceremonies is that there's a lot of drumming and there's singing and there's dancing. And those are also ways of going into an altered state, into a meditative altered state. And, shamanism, as it's been popularized, has taken a lot of those elements and stripped them from cultures and, taught people to use them to go into an altered state. And so, anybody can, go on YouTube and play some shamanic drums. Anybody can dance. Anybody can chant, learn to chant or sing. And if you do that, you can also put yourself into a meditative state in that way by dancing or singing or chanting or listening to rhythmic music. There's just, we have traditions around the world that teach people how to go into other realms. And so that's one of the things I try to do in my teaching is I try to, expose people to these different understandings of how we can, alter our consciousness in a positive way to access high level guidance.
So I can hear I'm about to have a leaf blower close by. So speaking of real world, what I'd like to also hear is about your hemisync. And I think I'm not getting the title of it accurate. So if you could talk about that, and is that one of the tools that people can use? And also then some more about the courses that you have. I mean, because truly people will want to find you and, find out about the courses that you have upcoming or this year and about your book.
Yeah. Not me going to visit all of the things, Jennifer, Lisa.
I know, it's like, okay.
Right.
Can't wait to go and look at it all.
What I'm most excited about right now is my Akashic Records course that I just launched on my website. And it's called Akashic Records Cosmic Wisdom. And it's a, online on-demand class you can take, whenever you want. And it's got over 45 lectures, videos, and journeys and meditations that you can follow. And, once you buy the course, you have lifetime access, so you can listen to the journey recordings over and over whenever you want. And I'm really excited about that because I was teaching Akashic Records in person for many years to small classes in different places. And then I took a break from teaching, and I just had a lot of people, and then I started teaching online, and I've just had a lot of people ask me, when are you going to create an Akashic Records course? Because we really liked that course, going to the records. So I just launched that course, and that's on my website, drbestmedicalintuitive.com, drbestmedicalintuitive.com. You can sign up for that there. And then I also have some other classes on my website. I have a medical intuition course. So again, this is something that I taught for many years in person, and I finally brought it all together into an online course. That one's even a longer course than the Akashic Records course. It's has quite a few more modules, and so it's a little bit more expensive than the Akashic Records. But medical intuition is the kind of course that you really need a lot of information to practice. It's not, it's a specialization. It's not just psychic development, right? It's a very specialized form of psychic work that is evidential, and you're dealing with information that's really important to people. So that course is more in depth. And then I also have a course called All About Auras, which I created because whenever I'm teaching my other classes, like whether it's medical intuition or psychic development or mediumship or Akashic records, there's always a section where we have to talk about the aura and the levels of existence. And so it's kind of information that everybody needs. If you're a healer or a psychic, you need to know about the aura and how to perceive it, whether you're perceiving it clairvoyantly or clairsentiently. And so that's just a kind of a short course on what is the aura, what's the history of the aura, how is the aura talked about in different cultures, and how does perceiving the aura help you to be a better psychic, a better healer. And that's, the Akashic Records course is like that too. I talk about, what are the Akashic Records? What's the history of that term? How is it understood in different cultures? What kind of questions can you ask? And then how to work with the records. What does it look like? And then there's all of these, practice, all these journey, all these audios that you can play. And then there's also some additional meditations in there, like higher self meditation and fire meditation. So there's a lot of different resources available in the Akashic Records class to help people learn how to access that. So I'm really excited about the classes I have on my website. And then my book, The Ethical Psychic, you can get that anywhere. Here it is. Like we mentioned earlier. And this is a book that I originally wrote, kind of as a guidebook for, healers and psychics and practitioners of various kinds, to help people to understand the risks of psychic work, to help people to, develop the traits that are best developed for an ethical psychic. And I just tell a lot of stories in the book too, a lot of cautionary tales about what can go wrong when you're not an ethical psychic. And these are stories from my life, things that I witnessed. And what I have found people telling me about the book is that it's also good for people who are not psychics and healers, but who are going to psychics and healers and who want to know how to find an ethical psychic or healer. So there's a lot of red flags I talk about in here, and there's things you should look for. Like if you're looking for a teacher, a spiritual or intuitive teacher, there are traits you should look for. And so that's the book. That book is for that as well. My HemiSync album just came out a couple months ago. And HemiSync, for those who don't now know, is this amazing technology that was developed by Robert Monroe, who wrote several books about his out-of-body travels. He was an engineer who started having spontaneous out-of-body experiences. And then because he was an engineer, he started to study his experiences and eventually developed this technology, which we now think of as like, it's kind of similar to like binaural beats, where he was working with both halves of the brain, putting different frequencies in each ear to create a new frequency, which helps people go to either alpha or theta, an altered state that allows you to access higher realms. And so I was really excited when they invited me to work with them, because I've always taught about HemiSync. I've always used HemiSync. And this CD allowed me to do one of my guided meditations with HemiSync also playing. So it's just the kind of thing that it gives you a little extra help in terms of getting to that other realm. And there's a lot of technologies like this, right? There's like, this is a technology created by an engineer. And then we have older technologies like drumming, that the rhythmic drumming has the same effect. What it does is it creates a certain frequency and causes your brainwave state to change because of the drumming or the chanting or the dancing. So this is like a new technology, very similar to old technologies. But I love it. I love HemiSync. And so it's a guided meditation. There's actually two on the album. There's one where I talk more, and then there's another one where there's less talking and more of just the hemi-sync technology playing and the music playing to help people go to the records. And then that CD, you're just going to that main library room. I did show them my meditation where I take people to all the rooms, and they thought, oh, that's too complicated for hemi-sync. And so, my more complicated guidance, which you get in my class on my website, that's kind of necessary to help you to go into another realm. Whereas with the hemi-sync, because you have the technology, you don't need as much guidance from me because you have the technology to help you. So it's just a different way. And people can get that on the hemi-sync website. I haven't yet added it to my website. I need to do that.
On the list.
Yeah, and I'm teaching. I also teach for the Shift Network, and I have 2 new classes coming up this year on the Shift Network. And you should definitely come to my website to get to those courses, because if you come to my website and you go through my link, then I get credit. But if you go to the Shift Network, then I don't get paid as much. So if you want to support me, go through my website, and I'll have links to the 2 classes I'm teaching this year on the Shift Network in May and July. In May, I'm teaching a course on soul growth and psychic gifts, a 7-week course. And then in July, I'm teaching an 18-week training, very extensive training. It's like a semester on medical mediumship and medical mysticism. And I've also taught classes on the Shift Network on Indigenous medical intuition. And those classes I taught live, but they're now available as on-demand classes that you can access, I think, through my website. I'm trying to remember if I have those links. Yeah, I think there's a link on the website for the Indigenous medical intuition course as well. And I have a book that's not out yet. It's supposed to be coming out very soon. Called Sovereign Wisdom, and it's a book about Native American philosophy with publishers Peter Lang.
Well, fantastic.
I
was so transported into those rooms when you were talking about it. I just can't wait to go check out the more in-depth course with it all, because I can literally imagine too, right? So that's just really exciting, and all of the resources that you offer with everything, and your expertise and your perspective and the honoring of the roots of everything. It's just really so fantastic, and I really recommend everybody go and check you out and buy your stuff or participate in your things, all of the things with you, because I just really love your voice and who you are in the space and all that you do. So to repeat your website, this will be in the show notes as well. It's Dr. Vest Medical Intuitive. That's drvestmedicalintuitive.com and drjenniferlisavest.com. And then again, the Ethical Psychic, you can find at your local bookshop or Amazon, penguinrandomhouse.com. And then what was the website again that you said to?
Bookshop. I don't know if it's bookshop.org or bookshop.com.
Okay.
But it's a consortium of independent bookstores where you can buy it online.
Great.
Well, and I think what I love, Jennifer Lisa, is the level of expertise and responsibility that you teach with it, but in a very both clear way, but it doesn't feel rigid.
Or overwhelming.
There you go. That's a better word for it. And it feels very, very doable in a sense of learning these things in a responsible way, because certainly with medical intuition, absolutely takes a lot of responsibility and skill. And of course, the ethical psychic. And then the Akashic records, whether it's for yourself or someone else. what just a fun curiosity and exploration.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think learning these topics should be fun, you know.
Yes.
Um, I think that's why Spirit had me become a philosophy professor first, because one of the things that my students used to say about me was that I was able to make philosophy easy to understand. And
Yes.
most people find philosophy very difficult to understand. And that was my goal. There are certain philosophers like Kant, which, people have such a hard time understanding. And I saw it as my purpose in those classes to make it so that everybody could understand it. Um, and I think that has served me well now, because now when I'm teaching, I teach the way I teach, there's a lot of depth. A lot of people teach kind of superficial classes where they just teach you a couple of things. My classes are very packed with a lot of information. Um, but they're also taught in a way that it's easy to understand. It's clear. Yes, there's a lot of information and you can go and read more. But I've kind of done that for you. I've done all the readings. I've done the research. I've studied with different teachers, and then I bring it all together, syncretically and in a way that's easy for people to access. Where you don't have to have had the training I had or read the books that I read to understand what I'm teaching.
That's great, because I'm so, you have a PhD and a postdoc, like the level of knowledge that you have, and wisdom, of course, but the level of knowledge, I'm like, yeah, that's a long, long process. So I love that you are able to condense it down for everybody to be able to access. It's just amazing.
Everybody
Okay.
needs to,
Yeah.
certain people like me who were meant to pursue academic education, academic training. Everybody wasn't meant for that, and everybody doesn't need that. Um, and we don't want information to be limited to
Mhm.
just those people who are on that path. At least not the information that I came to teach, because what I came to teach is not meant for just college students. It's not meant for just people in certain environments. It's meant for anybody who is on a life path where they've been urged to develop certain gifts to be of service. And that's a lot of people. And they don't all have academic backgrounds.
Well, and like I said earlier, a lot of people who have been taught to forget those gifts and then are looking for a way to remember and to find a skilled path is so valuable to and then the other piece of it that I think that we are doing is normalizing it. So it is becoming far more mainstream to remember these, it's our human intellect, it's our capability. And so to remember these ways that we have learned from the ancients all the way through today. And then there are those who remember, learn to remember, and share it also. So, gosh, thank you so much.
Yeah, there's so many more souls incarnating now with gifts, and we're on a light work path because of the situation we're in globally, right? We're in a crisis. And we're at a turning point. And so there are so many souls on the planet now who came specifically to help us.
I'm guided to share just for a minute one of the guides that I worked with a friend of mine who was raised on the Flathead Reservation in Montana, and went through the boarding schools and really all the hardships that can go with that. And the same thing, his practices were illegal by the time he left the reservation. they were still illegal. And so he was able to go to a lot of the ceremonies through my communities, and be reunited with some of his indigenous ceremonies. Well, it turned out that when I was working with him, one of his ancestors came through to do the work, Grandpa Magpie. And he was the last medicine man of the Flathead people that Jim was descended from. And he was alive maybe during the 1800s. So he would come into the sessions with me with Jim, and he would actually merge with me. And he would ask me to feel like, what is this? And feel the Reiki energy. And he would, actually be engaged with me, both in the healing work he was doing with Jim, but also really investigating what is this energy. And then he also did that with the ceremonies that Jim was able to attend. And, Uweepi, Sundance, Sweat Lodge, Luwampis, things that were new for Jim. But Grandpa Magpie would come and he would attend the ceremonies also and talk about how he wanted to learn what the traditions were in today's world in the 21st century. And then he would also go with Jim. Jim had prostate cancer, and he would also go to the Western medicine that Jim was accessing too. And he said he was studying those practices. And he shared with me that he was teaching the souls on the other side so that they would come into this world already having this knowing of the current teachings of these ways and the practices, and that he was a teacher on the other side for these ways, so they would be born with this knowing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of teaching that happens on the other side.
Yeah.
And
No.
that's also why it's good to learn how to consciously go into an altered state, because once you start getting into deep meditation, into journeying, into going to the Akashic records, into mediumship, it then makes you more likely to remember some of your trips to the other side that you used to think of as dreams. It makes you a little bit more conscious of what's out there, and then you could maybe remember some of the lessons that you're getting at night. A lot of people go to spirit school at night, but they don't necessarily remember that they go.
Have any idea that they go.
Yeah. And so, as time goes on, more and more people are going to remember and are going to be more consciously integrating what they're learning in other realms into this realm.
And we're so very glad. And as an older woman now, I feel like what I can do is just hold the stability for it as they come in, and stay stable, just stay on the path, and help create that stability for these new souls coming in and the ones after them as well. And of course, at my age too. So everybody, it's not just them, but
yeah, if we don't have the wise women, the grandmothers, we don't have anything.
yeah, that's the truth, the grandmothers. Well, Dr. Vest, thank you so much as always. And we would love to have you back when that works into your schedule too, and have such a wealth of knowledge about so many topics that is incredibly valuable to our listeners and the people. And so not just for thank you for being here, but thank you for the work that you do. It's so important.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love these conversations.
Me too. Could listen all day, but I do know you also have other schedules. So thank you, everyone. And Robin, did you want to finish up with anything?
Find us at reikilifestyle.com. And, we already gave out Jennifer Lisa's information. So I think that that's all that we need to finish up to say. So just thank you. And we will see you next time.
Yes. And we'll put all that information in the show notes too, of course. All right. Thank you, everyone. And
Bye.